Hey everyone, and welcome back. On today's video, I really wanted to share the main reason why I decided to give up my past and focus on glorifying God. I think it's a great way for you to understand where I'm coming from with a lot of my reasoning with my different video posts and the reason I do certain things. I know a lot of times when people decide to pursue God, sometimes they're at the lowest point in their life. They feel completely hopeless, or maybe they lost a loved one, or they lost a job that they were really passionate about. And I felt like for me, it was very different. I felt like I was at the top of my game in life, to say. I had just graduated from UCLA with a great GPA. I was in a 3-year relationship with an amazing guy who was a professional athlete who truly cared about me. I had a high-paying job at a genetic sequencing laboratory, and I just finished a pageant. I had done side modeling. I was close to starting my master's degree, and life was supposed to be great, right? But I still felt like there was something missing. I was like, that's it? That's all there is to it? Like, I have everything I should want on paper, you know? I have a great job, a great relationship, all of these things, but why do I still feel like there's something missing? And I've mentioned before in other videos that I had good girl syndrome, where, you know, I was nice to everybody. I didn't say bad words really ever. I volunteered with the homeless and other different nonprofit organizations since I was a teenager. I felt like I was doing everything possible to be that boss lady that I wanted to be for so long. But my heart felt like a clay pot that had been broken multiple times and put back together with pieces of tape. So it wasn't like sturdy. It just felt like there was something missing. I know that in a lot of my relationships, I would break up with one boyfriend that I barely dated for any time because they were so nice to me and so kind, but I knew that I didn't want to be with them. And I would start talking to somebody else that was really nice to me and very kind and polite, and I didn't really like them, or I didn't really see a future with them either, but you know, they're nice to me, so I'll date them. I didn't know how to be single, and I felt emotionally dependent on there always being someone there to talk to, a guy, even if it was just over the phone. And of course, this goes back to my youth when my dad passed away from cancer when I was really young. I had a hole in my heart by not having my dad, so I tried to fill it with attention from men, even though I still had this good girl syndrome where I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to do anything with you, but I want you around just, you know, as that male figure in my life. During my time at UCLA, everything was research-based, so I could never submit anything without first researching it, and I feel like that played into me coming to Christ, where I was like, okay, you have to convince my brain first, and then maybe we can talk. I prided myself in knowing random facts and random things, and I enjoyed reading tons of different books, and the only time I would actually ever quote the Bible was to discredit it, or attempt to discredit it, because I would choose a verse, take it completely out of context, and be like, oh, see, so this is why the Bible is wrong. The Bible to me was a book of rules and hypocrisy that people use to justify their judginess towards others. That was my idea of the Bible. To me, it was you either had to choose science or you had to choose God, and all of the scientific theories I had read about completely surpassed, in my mind, a book that was written a gazillion years ago. But that's exactly it. Those were theories. They're scientific guesses. And ultimately, if you think about it, God created science. During a time when, you know, people thought the earth was flat, the Bible stood its ground and said it's a sphere suspended by nothing. And a few years ago, humans learned that the galaxies are ever expanding, the universe is expanding, and the Bible already said that. It was expanded like a curtain. And God used my stubbornness with science and researching to demonstrate little things like that in the Bible to me. And I always say there's those people that say they felt God in their heart, and that's when they knew that they wanted to follow Jesus. And for me, I was just like, okay, like I said before, convince my brain and then we can talk. And I'd be like, okay, well, if Jesus comes down from heaven and stands right next to me and he's like, hey, you need to follow me, then I'll believe it. And then when I look back, I see all the people that had Jesus right next to him, and they still didn't believe. He's like performing miracles in front of them. And so at the end of the day, it's like, okay, would I have believed if he was right next to me? And maybe just such a prideful stance on me wanting them to match what I felt I needed to convince me. And even when they would tell me all these things, I was like, okay, well, let me research your Bible and I'll get back to you. Because I wanted to make sure what they were saying was true. And it's funny because the Bereans also did the same thing, that when their leaders would preach to them, they would go back daily to check the scriptures to see if what they were saying was true. And it's so crazy to me how so many different people, I think it's like 40 different authors, wrote the Bible in different decades spanning hundreds of years. And it's just amazing to me that it's so cohesive in what it says and all of it matches up. And I know, for example, in Isaiah, 700 years before Jesus even existed, Isaiah's talking about what's going to happen in Jesus verbatim. It's word for word exactly what's going to happen in Jesus. And this was 700 years before he was even born. I finally gave up my stubbornness to even let somebody teach me about the Bible. And then I finally gave up my stubbornness to accept that God and science don't have to be two different things. And slowly I've seen how God has chipped away at my stubborn and prideful heart. And I remember in 2015, I prayed to God to mold me to be the woman that he wanted me to be for his glory, because I had carried this good girl syndrome into my relationship with God. I had already been baptized. I was already learning about the Bible, but I still had my good girl syndrome. So I wanted him to really mold me into who he wanted me to be. And I didn't realize he was going to take this very literal. And for those of you who know me, you know that in 2016, it was one of the hardest years of my life. And this went on for months, and there was a point where I couldn't walk for 3 days, and go figure, it would be a symbolic number in the Bible. I couldn't walk for 3 days. And I remember my 5'3" mom, I'm almost 5'8", 5'9", and she would have to carry me to the bathroom to take a shower. And I remember we both were crying, and I was like, why is this happening to me? This is terrible. And even though I had everybody praying for me, I couldn't understand what God was doing. And everything I had put my value in my whole life was taken from me in a sense, because my Hawaiian hair that everybody would praise, oh, it's so long and so beautiful, it was falling out. And I remember bobby pinning, part of my hair in a certain way so that it would cover the bald spots. My skinny arms that I had always shown off with, tube tops and different shirts were now covered in rashes. So I always wore long sleeves, and I still have those rashes to this day. So I still kind of wear long sleeves, but also I'm coming back to, it's fine. You don't have to hide it. It's part of who I am now. And the nose that I wished wasn't as wide, and I didn't like how many freckles I have on it. Now I was just grateful to have a nose, which just sounds so weird. So it's like the scar was right on my nose where I could stare at it every single day, and it was just spreading. And even though it was peeling and, I had this giant scar, I just wanted my nose to be okay. And it was funny because I didn't care about the superficial things. I was just happy to be alive. I was not even sure what was happening, if I was going to die. And for once, I didn't care if I was single. I was just happy to be alive. I honestly had some of the most amazing moments praying with different brothers and sisters, and they're my ride or dies to this day. A lot of times things I pray for can sometimes go over my head. I don't even realize that they're answered prayers. And I'm sure I've missed many miracles that I've prayed for months ago or days ago, and I just immediately forget them and they're answered. And there's times I've prayed specific prayers where I was like, please make it extremely obvious, and they happen and I see it, and I'm just completely, it's just mind blown. And some would happen really quickly, and like I said, some would take months, years to happen. But when they do happen and it's right in front of you, you're just like, oh my gosh, I have no words. I purposely pray super specific prayers, and when they're answered exactly how I wanted or how God felt they needed to be answered, it's extremely it's amazing. You have no words. There's no chance for them to be coincidences, because like I said, I make them so specific. And it's amazing to see how God has worked in my life. Like I said, I still have some of the scars. I have all these baby hairs growing back that I always joke around with people. I'm just so grateful for all of my little baby hairs. And maybe I'll have these scars forever. Maybe I won't, but they're such good reminders of where I was at a point in my life. And when I asked God to mold me. And it has taught me to pray different prayers because that one was very specific. And I've given up my own will for my life and allowed God to guide me and be the Lord of my life. And I'm still super far from where I would like to be. I know it's a daily process and a daily battle with sin where, you know, I sometimes feel like, oh, was it easier when I didn't have to do this, or, you know, glorify God? And then when I think about it for even 2 seconds, I'm like, absolutely not worth it. Not leaving what I have now to go back to what I used to have, where I thought I had it all and I was so happy. And it's pointless. The world is honestly pointless. Now I have a purpose for my life, and I'm so grateful for God's mercy and grace on my life. And I still have so many scars physically and emotionally that I deal with, you know, the consequences that I dealt with when I was younger, where I'd be like, oh, let me live my life, party, do this, you know, date guys. And then when I'm older, I'll come back to God. You know, once I'm older, I have a few kids. And I feel like I had to go through those things because I've learned a level of compassion that I never knew I had. I thought I was already a compassionate person. You know, I used to serve the homeless, or I've always loved little kids and animals. And going through what I went through, it's on a whole different level of compassion, where I needed to go through that because I needed to not put my value in my appearance. And I feel like God was trying to get my attention for so long. He gave me so many chances for me to do it on my own, and I didn't. And finally he was like, well, you asked for help, you wanted to grow, and this is how it's gonna be. And I totally got it. I've given up because God's plan for my life surpasses anything I could have ever imagined, ever. And he continues to show me that daily. And I've given up my ways because there's no greater love than God's. They're just, as cliche, as silly as that sounds, there just isn't. And I feel like I said, when other people say, oh, I felt God in my heart and now I want to learn about him. For me, it was, I wanted to learn about him on an academic level first. And then I saw how he's like, okay, well, this is how I'm going to get to you. I'm going to show you all the historical and scientific evidence in the Bible that people are just barely figuring out nowadays. And then I'll work with your heart. And he totally did. And I feel like it was perfect for me. God knows exactly what you need. But he'll never force you to be like, hey, you have to listen to me. It's a choice. He gives us free will. And you'll find him when you seek him with all of your heart. It's absolutely true. And I know there's a lot of little things that people say, oh, well, what about this? And what about that? And, you know, I interpreted this way. And how come there's so many branches of religion? At the end of the day, you have the Bible. Read it yourself. I know it can sound confusing sometimes. And at least with me and my ADD, I'd be like, I don't even know what I'm reading. But I feel like different poetry that I didn't understand before in the Bible, now it totally makes sense. But the first step is you have to be willing to open your Bible and study and reach out to others for help to explain it to you. Those who have been in the faith a long time and understand it. But at the same time, you have to do your own studies, because sometimes people can say stuff and you're like, oh, okay, I'm just going to believe whatever they say. But you have to go back and do your own research too. And one of the main things I had to remember, even to this day, is scientific theories are just that. They're scientific guesses. But unlike any other religion I studied, and again, I mostly study them just to take a prideful stance and be like, oh, I know what Buddhism teaches. Oh, I know what this teaches. I know what Hinduism, you know, Baha'i, all these things, all these different religions. But all God wants is a relationship with you. Many of the religions that I studied, they didn't emphasize this. They saw God as this, you know, supreme God who has power of everything. And why does he let some people be poor and other people, you know, who are evil, they're so rich and they have everything they've ever wanted? And you have to dig deeper, because now I know that I've been blessed with so much, and in turn I have to share that blessing with others. So I want to encourage you to not give up. Keep studying it out. If you have any questions, send them to me in the comment section. I know there's so many questions, and I encourage you to go out and, you know, Google, what does it mean for this? Or buy different books. I mean, I've had tons of books because I feel like that's how it gets to my brain, where I'm like, oh, I understand. I have to read it and really research it. I'm still grasping onto that research side of myself. And it isn't until you seek him fully with all your heart, even if it's with a judgmental mind like I was, but I was seeking him. I wanted to learn more about him. that's when he can actually work in you and reveal himself to you. And again, this video didn't go into super detail about everything that I had questions about, but if you have questions, please comment them below and I'll try and answer them as quickly as possible. But once again, thanks so much for watching. And if you haven't already done so, I ask that you please subscribe to this channel. And as always, I love you to eternity, and remember, God loves you way more. But until next time, bye everyone.